And here's the thing. Have you changed your mind on a second lockdown? I'm kind of pulling my hair out here at this end. Just with the divisive, changing nature of these elements of the coronavirus story. Something changes every day, right? We're here every day at 1 o'clock, and there is an alteration to some element of the narrative. Have you changed your mind now on the second lockdown? Are you ready for the most pessimistic sentence you've heard all day? Here we go. The Coronavirus Vaccine Task Force chair says the first COVID vaccines are likely to be imperfect and might not prevent infection. Let's just put that against the other headlines. Record deaths since May, more infections, herd immunity out of the window, and now no confirmed vaccine. Have you changed your mind on that second lockdown? 0344 499 1000. Are we back, maybe, to the... I mean, how many times did we discuss the sort of what they called health versus wealth? Are we kind of back there now? Is that where we're at? And there is confusion, of course, lots of confusion. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the way this is developing. So we had yesterday, and it's interesting, I don't want to say Valence was right, but he said, a month after October, we'd be looking at 200 deaths a day. Yesterday, we had 367 new COVID deaths confirmed, the largest number since May, and 265 higher than the previous day. Now, I'll give that some context, because all of these figures are stripped of context when they are thrown around on, I don't want to use the phrase mainstream media. I mean, how do you define that? But we hear those numbers and we don't get any... If I told you more people died of flu this month than COVID, that might begin the context. If I told you that actually on the third week of October this year, we had fewer people die than died on the third week of October last year. That's the kind of context that I want. If I told you that a random sample of 500 people who are all in hospital, all gravely ill, who are probably not going to last the week, are either going to die of influenza, of pneumonia, or of COVID, of one of the three. Dying of COVID doesn't make things any more serious, but boy, does it inflame the headlines. I'm with Richard Madeley on this. There's nothing conspiratorial about this. I know it's very real and it's very, very bad. And it causes... I was talking to a clinician around about an hour ago about exactly this. He was on the front line during the real height of this. He knows people. He's seen people on ventilators. He was in the ICU units. He knows how grim that could be. But I'm also recognising here, and I think you sort of have to recognise, the total lack of context that we see in all of these figures. And I would imagine, we're talking later about the riots in Italy and Spain, and also France. There's every chance tonight that President Macron will announce a full-on lockdown for France, amidst the fear of growing numbers. And of course, growing numbers is only part of the story. I heard Julia this morning. I never thought I'd use the phrase. I heard Julia Hartley-Brewer demolish an epidemiologist. Well, that may be over exit. She certainly gave him a run for his money. She certainly called him to question Sweden comparison. I know they're not all direct comparisons, neither's New Zealand, etc. You could play that game all day long. But there is mass confusion on this. But let's just take it based on the numbers. When Valence stood up, what was that? I've lost count. I don't even know what month it is, frankly. 6 weeks ago? 6 weeks ago, I made that grim prediction that we'll have 50,000 cases a day by October and 200 deaths per day come November. I mean, is he talking about people who would have been walking around now, having a perfectly active lifestyle and getting on with things, going to work, seeing the kids, running around the place, doing marathons, whatever, who've suddenly died? Or are we talking about people who are, and this is all uncomfortable language, I understand that, I'm talking about people who are already really not going to survive, let's put it that way, and happen to die of COVID. It could have been influenza. It could have been pneumonia. It's usually pneumonia pops up on those death certificates all the time. And I would imagine if you are in a high state of clinical vulnerability, it would sort of make sense to me that, well, it could be COVID. There's a pandemic. It happens on this thing called planet Earth. Every 2 or 3 decades, a pandemic will come around. It'll cause some damage. That's part of being in the human race, kids. That's sort of what happens. You do your best. You run around. You try to stop it. You want to protect people. You don't want people to die if possible. You do all you can. You try and find a vaccine so that we're immune from it. And then, 30 years' time, there'll be another one comes hurtling around the corner as well. This isn't it's not a war that like a nation has created somewhere, unless you go down to Chinese conspiratorial route, which we're not doing, by the way. I mean, this is just what happens on our planet from time to time. And some people will get ill and some people won't make it. And the vulnerable will stand a greater chance of getting ill and a greater chance of not making it. As sure as night follows day. So if you're laid in hospital, and it is more than just the winter of your life, and you are highly vulnerable, those final moments, you're likely, it's not the cancer that got you, it's the pneumonia that got you. That's the case for almost everyone I know. Throw in a new pandemic and some of those people will die of coronavirus. COVID-19 will be on the death certificate. That does not mean that we have fresh, spring in their step type people running around the place struck with it. Sure, some people will be unlucky. There are those cases. I think it's still only about 300 people under the age of 60 with no underlying health conditions that have died of COVID-19. You will find a similar statistic for people who died of influenza without any underlying health conditions. So I don't think it's over-cynical. I don't think it's conspiratorial, but I do think it's a reasonable question to ask. And if I put all of that against the sort of the headlines that I'm seeing, because you can kind of see Boris Johnson looking for a way to rephrase this so it doesn't look as if he's nicked Sir Keir Starmer's idea. Are we heading that way? But then when you look at the numbers, 20-odd thousand people yesterday. These are infections. Being infected by a new virus is like, again, it's night follows day, right? Some people will get infected. Most people will not even know they've been infected. Even those that have, most people will survive that very quickly. 99.9% of people on the planet are not going to die of COVID-19. Mr. Macron is about to close France. I mean, you have to let that settle in sometimes and think, right, okay, we're going to really? Really? So this month, more people died of flu in the UK than COVID. I'm sure that will change. I get that. But to wheel out the headline that, what was it yesterday? I'll just give you that again. 367 new COVID-related deaths. Had COVID not been around, in all likelihood, we would have the same death rate yesterday. That's my point. 0344 499 1000. I stand to be corrected on this, by the way. And it could be that if you didn't have COVID, you might survive for another 10 days. It might be the case. And I know that, when this has happened in my own family, I remember a doctor saying, your mother is passing away. Passing away, not pass. Your mother is passing away. Wow, what does that mean? He said, well, that might mean that she's not with you this afternoon. It could mean that 3 or 4 days later, she's not with you. She died of pneumonia, but she had cancer. We're kind of, that's where we're at, isn't it? That's what these figures are. Surely that's what these figures are. 0344 499 1000. So fundamentally, let's look at all the evidence that we are told from the world of politics and science. There is no herd immunity, okay? That, we are told, is completely... Herd immunity is out the window. We're told that a vaccine task force, the chair of the vaccine task force, has said the first COVID vaccines are likely to be imperfect and might not prevent infection. We know we had 360-odd people die yesterday. We're in the tens of thousands of people getting infected on a daily basis. Does that change your view on easing the lockdown? Does that change your view on a second lockdown? 0344 499 1000. I was looking across social media, by the way, and some people are saying, no, that's the evidence now. We need a greater lockdown right across the country for 3 months. Really? Are you supporting that? If you are changing your mind on a second lockdown, I'd love to hear why. If you are simply not buying any of this, and again, it's nothing about a conspiracy theory. It's just about, I'm a sensible person. Most of you listening to this are sensible people. It's stuff that doesn't add up, right? It's stuff that doesn't add up. How dare anybody tell me and just wheel out a statistic for COVID-related deaths without giving it context, without telling me that fewer people died on the third week of October this year than the year before, that more people this month died of flu. I need that information because I need the context. Otherwise, you're just scaring the bejesus out of old people.